Hey, what's up, guys? This is the Endless Endeavor podcast, and I'm down in Prescott, Arizona with Mike Glover. And we got connected. I actually got connected through him. I watched him on Andy Stump, and then he did the same with me on the Cleared Hot. And I hit him up, and we've been talking a little bit, and I was like, you know what? With everything that you're doing with American Contingency and Fieldcraft survival, I think right now it's imperative that people kind of have some answers and have some direction. And I was like, this dude, that's your whole mission, is giving people direction for when shit hits the fan.
Yeah, you had prompted me because you're like, dude, this is TST. This is a time-sensitive target. We got to hit this. And I was, Andy Stump probably has like a 1-year waiting list. And I was like, man, let's do it. And so you flew out, and here we are, man. I just appreciate it because the time is now. You're right. It's imperative.
And I think, we were just talking about out in the parking lot. In the last 24 hours, things continue to just explode. And I feel like at some point, something's going to be like the powder keg that sets everything off. And that may have been that 17-year-old kid last night. It's hard to say. But eventually, enough people are going to get fed up with their cities being burned and their rights being trampled on that they're going to stand up against both, like we talked about. I think there's going to be a three-tiered approach. I think it's going to be patriots, a corrupt government, and then just the shitheads that are out burning, looting, destroying, and really they're just opportunists,
Yeah, it's weird because a lot of their perspective, they would call themselves freedom fighters, but there's that mingled with a whole bunch of opportunists that are criminals.
Yep.
And it's weird because yesterday was Tuesday, right? So it was Tuesday night that Wisconsin, now 17-year-old being reported kid winds up shooting 2 dudes and injuring another guy, which by all accounts, I'm very careful not to come out early and just speculate on stuff because that kind of stuff could be toxic and you don't want to look like an asshole. You don't want to look stupid.
Yeah, of course.
But everything that I've gotten so far is very clearly defined as an easy case of self-defense. Gets hit in the head with a skateboard, gets a Molotov cocktail thrown at him, gets brutalized, has a video that he's putting out before saying he doesn't want any issues. He's not there to attack anybody. He's there to defend a business and the people who own that business. And he only wants to stand in solidarity. He actually said that as a young kid. And then they start beating the crap out of him. And in my opinion, risking his life. And then he does what he has to do to defend his life. And that could be the tipping point. I think maybe the tipping point for me would be somebody on the right perceived it could be just that kid. They think he's a right winger. They think I'm a right winger.
Yeah, they think we all are.
Yeah, I smoke dope. Like I'm not a right winger.
Yep.
Hey, so yeah,
I'm not a cop anymore. So guess what?
Yeah,
me too.
There's nothing wrong with that. Like
yeah,
it's okay to be center line, but we're associated with being a right winger. But it could just be an American who loves his community.
Yeah,
and then he winds up shooting a dude, a left winger, because usually this involves radical ideology on the left side. Kill somebody else, and then you have the tipping point for everybody to come out, hit the streets, and then it looks like melee, man.
Well, and I'll tell you the problem is that the left has given all of these people a free pass to behave like this. They're not getting condemned by any of the politicians. They're not being, they should be getting arrested and put in jail for this kind of behavior, but they've been getting a pass. The whole reason they're getting a pass is because the left wants to appeal to those people because guess what? Election's right around the corner.
That's disgusting, right?
It is disgusting.
That's the worst part of it for me is we have this idea that if you have a movement and it's impactful enough socially because it's on everybody's mind, then you can get away with whatever you want. Even up to assaulting and murdering people. You could shoot people, you could stop their cars in traffic, you could beat people up, and there is no recourse. It's so bizarre.
And I think because the government and law enforcement are kind of having their hands tied to being forced to giving these elements of people a free pass, that's empowering to them. And they think, hey, we can just do whatever we want now. Because you can see when people stand up against these people, they're shocked. They're like, wait, what? What is it? I got shot?
Yeah.
What, you're shooting me? Like,
call the police.
Yeah, call the police. Like, no. If you want to go out and you want to be a violent person, then guess what? You better be prepared to meet violence with violence. But they're not. And so, yeah, we'll see where this goes. But I mean, the whole reason I came down here to talk to you is because I feel like people need to have an understanding of what the future may hold. And there's a lot of veterans out there like us that, yeah, we can shoot, move, and communicate, but I feel like this is bigger than that. And you know, like you have like a holistic approach to survival, both like just having the right vehicle, having fuel, having food, all these little things that even to tell you the truth, man, I thought all the people prepping for the longest time were like, you know, the
paranoid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tinfoil hats.
Yeah.
I was like, you guys are ridiculous, you know? And guess what? Now I have a giant fuel tank and a couple months worth of food. I bought a bunch of ammo. I'm doing all the same stuff that everybody's doing because we all know if it reaches that point and you're not prepared, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Straight up. Like you're going to be behind the power curve. Good luck playing catch up at that point. You know,
it's funny because before all this happened, which is this social discourse, we were prepping for the pandemic, you know, so when you look at the pandemic and the issues it caused, it's definitely had some social constraints. I mean, it has literally put people at home, and whether they're in poverty already, it's compounded bad issues to worse. So for us, preparation has always been something that we've been teaching. And now the focus in preparation just happens to be security, which is, you know, it's a principle of patrolling, the number one principle.
Yep.
So all we've done is put security now as the center focal point of what you should be focusing your attention on, because you have to survive literally, physically, tangibly in order to execute your plan of survival in the first place.
Yeah, make all the other things
Absolutely.
fall into place.
I think it's so important, man.
For sure. That's why you got like 30 rolls of toilet paper in there.
Yeah, dude. We
saw that.
Yeah, our new place, because this is the Prescott place, the Heber City place is going to be, we literally are going to set that place up to be a safe place as a local contingent to people to rendezvous if something happens. Because it's a big industrial park. It's easily defendable. It's in a good piece of terrain, which happens to be the valley of Heber Valley. But it's a good consolidation point for people who are in trouble. I mean, if you're in Salt Lake City, in Provo, you know, a 60-plus-year-old man just got shot in the chest by a member of Antifa with a pistol. And nobody, if you drive through Provo, there's kids riding their bikes on the sidewalk. It looks like Pleasantville. And that could happen in the best neighborhoods with the worst people coming into those neighborhoods. And so we want to set that up for like that kind of contingency as well.
Cool. So, I mean, I've been following you for a while, but for people that are brand new to being introduced to Mike Glover and your different companies, like you got Fieldcraft Survival and American Contingency, just kind of unpack that and break that down to what people can go look at, what they can find, what it entails, and what they can get out of it.
Yeah, so Fieldcraft Survival, I did CIA contracting for a few years after my active duty time. I was a Sargent Major in Special Forces and spent my whole career really after 9/11 in that capacity. And like you, I saw the flaws in government and thought that I could make a better impact and also like a better legacy for my life, you know, for my family, for everything I was doing by stepping away. And so in 2016, I started Fieldcraft in 2015, but I did my last agency rotation in Pakistan in 16. And I stepped away and started Fieldcraft Survival. And the idea, which is still the mission set from the very beginning, was we didn't want to create a politically driven agenda in preparedness. We didn't want to be known as like right-wingers in that field of expertise, because it truly takes away from the opportunity for people to learn. And I think if you study disasters and catastrophes, it's an equal opportunist. It doesn't care what color you are, what political affiliation you are. It will kill you all the same. So all the things that we learned in the military, and I learned in special operations, and deliberately putting yourself in the worst case scenarios, I realized in civilian sectors, there's no process. There's no planning process. There's no contingency planning. There's no checks on equipment, checks on learning. There's nothing, no structure. So taking those processes and turning it into training people in literal things that are going to happen in a gunfight, as opposed to like this ninja stuff that a lot of people are teaching, focus on fundamentals and core values of preparedness. And, whether you're, a cowboy in Texas or you're a left, leaning left in San Francisco, we want to provide that training and opportunity. So we do training, we do equipment, we do a whole bunch of stuff. I'll get a podcast as well. And that throughout the years has manifested itself, especially after the pandemic, into this American Contingency thing. Now, the deal with American Contingency is it's not for profit. I mean, it's under my EIN, my company, for profit, because if you look at the 501c3 construct, it's a freaking nightmare.
Of course it is.
It is. So what we wanted to do is, in private industry, is essentially set up a better way to bring people into the fold of preparedness. And the go criteria for me for starting American Contingency was partially Portland, when you had people calling the police and police officers were being hamstrung and not allowed to do their job, meaning the government wasn't doing their job to protect people, which is should be their number one priority. Out of all the things they mess up, at least get that right.
Yeah, how are they messing this up?
Exactly.
But we're seeing it more and more every day.
Yeah, last weekend, not this last weekend, the weekend before, 60 calls in Portland, larceny, burglary, even a sexual assault. And cops were called and no cops showed because they were busy dealing with the protesters or being told that they wouldn't go and do those active calls. That's a huge problem.
Yeah. And I saw the same thing in Seattle, like when they had the Chaz set up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you were right in the heart of that.
Calls for service. They were being told, hey, we don't have officers able to respond. And there was even murders that took place in there.
Yeah, two murders. I said two, and somebody at this last American Contingency meet said there was 3 total that took place.
Jeez.
So now you have this, like you said, pandering to these people, allowing them to get away with whatever they're doing. And I'm at a point, I'm okay with even that because I just don't care. I'm too busy.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like a burden of responsibility. But then when you affect people's lives, like law-abiding citizens' lives, like this kid, he's protecting a business in a community. It's not like he went to them. They came to that area and started violently protesting and attacking, which they're not protesters anymore. They're criminals.
They're opportunists, like using the guise of protest to just go cause mayhem.
That's it.
And it's funny, like I was on the phone for the last 2 hours driving up here, and I got in a big argument with one of my liberal friends, and she's like, because I posted the video of the guy that got shot in the arm.
Yeah.
And she's like, how could you support this guy shooting someone? I said, well, how could you not?
Yeah. You see his right hand, he's holding a Glock?
Yeah. Not only is that guy threatening his physical safety, but he's out looting, rioting, and there's people out there that just set up a perimeter to stop people from looting.
A defensive perimeter
to stop people from looting and rioting their businesses. And this is what she told me. And so this is the mindset of the left, and I just can't wrap my head around it. Is she said, that guy lived 20 miles away. He didn't need to go into the city. The looters were only destroying physical property, and no piece of physical property is worth somebody's life.
Yes.
And I'm like, it's not, you can't look at it as somebody's physical property.
Yeah.
You look at it as their livelihood. Yeah, you're taking their livelihood away. And she goes, that's what insurance is for, Greg. And I'm like, I can't even believe I'm having a real conversation, because if you think that's what insurance is for, then what you're saying is these people should be able to go out, be destructive, ruin things. And guess what? Insurance doesn't pay for it. You and I pay for it.
Yeah. Come in my house and rape my wife because that's what counseling's for. Come in my house and burn my house down because that's what insurance is for.
Yeah. It's
like,
asinine.
where's their, like when people come out to protest, that is part of their protected right.
Yep.
But when they turn that protest into something else, which is criminal activity, they are criminals. So when they are affecting other people's lives, like that person, that 17-year-old kid, is in a defensive posture in his community. And you have outsiders representing an insurgent organization, which is strategically and tactically doing what they're doing. And they know what they're doing. It's not like these are random acts of compassion or passion. They're doing this as a tactic. That's a problem.
That's long been established. When people first started saying that, this is getting funded and there's pallets of bricks and these are coordinated attacks. Again, not being like a tinfoil hat wearer, I started thinking like, wait, are you serious? What's going on here? And then sure as shit, you can't deny it anymore.
Yeah.
This is coordinated attacks.
Yeah. I actually did the same thing when, when I hear something like that and I see the pictures and I start doing research, I started texting buddies of mine who are in law enforcement who were in these areas. And they literally said there was buses, there was a report that they got briefed in the morning where they were shipping protesters in at a hotel and somebody picked up the tab and paid everybody's lodging at that hotel just to provide the support. Now, I don't want to speculate that it's like these big, powerful people, but somebody who comes in there who pays for that is a strategic and very deliberate operation.
Yeah.
That's a campaign. That is not acts of passion because they feel emotional about what happened. That's called insurgency.
Yep. And I talked about it a couple podcasts ago, but one of my buddies who's U.S. Marshal Special Operations, so they're going all over the country. Mm-hmm. They're being shipped to whatever city is in the most dire need of help. And he worked in D.C. and he worked in Portland. And lo and behold, he confronted some of the same people.
Wow.
Think about that, dude.
Coast to coast.
Yeah. He's like, bro, the same people face to face confronting them. Like that sold me.
Yeah.
That this isn't just people that are like disgruntled and going out in their
their own communities, which would
this is a big effort.
Yeah. I was disturbed by the BLM movement where they went into Portland, into the residential neighborhoods, and were calling people out of their homes. Like literally doing call outs.
And saying, we're going to kill you.
Yeah, we're going to kill you.
We're going to kill you.
Yeah, we're going to burn this neighborhood down. Come out of your homes.
We deserve these houses, and you should have to pay us money too. And like, how can anybody that can even like process information logically think that that's a viable way to behave? But it's happening, dude.
It's happening all over. So, with the AMCON, with American Contingency, the idea is, bring people into the fold, but give them not only access to situational awareness, just technical skill sets, but also allow them to socially network and support each other. Like I would never advocate for anybody hitting the streets and doing any of that unless it was their own business.
Yeah.
Like my mom called me when this was all going on. She has a business in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which became infamous when one of the protesters, in quotations, decided to burn down the marketplace in downtown and set himself on fire and died. Like, how does his mom feel about how he went out in the world?
He's leaving a legacy behind.
He was trying to dump gas.
That's a Rage Against the Machine shit.
Dude, insane, man. And so she said, son, I'm concerned. My mom has been doing cosmetology for 40 years in this country. Like, came from this country from nothing. She met my dad in the military, came from Korea, and has absolutely everything that she has poured into her life invested in her business. That's entrepreneurship in America. And so that business is everything. It's her livelihood. Like if she doesn't have that, she has nothing.
How does she eat?
How does she eat?
Yep.
How does she do anything? So she felt like her business was potentially threatened because it was in the proximity where all this stuff was going on. I actually put out a thing on my story and had 10, 12 dudes that were prepared from Fort Bragg to literally on QRF respond and take care of that business and protect it. And when I'm looking at people who are engaging bad guys, I don't want people to die for a bronze statue from the Civil War. Like, I just don't want people to do that.
Yeah.
But if that's your community, it's a different story.
Of course.
And so we advocate for people in their own communities to network and to defend each other, because something to die for is your family.
Yep.
And protecting your friends and your tribe.
So then a big part of the American Contingency is establishing that network of people that can respond to help people in those specific scenarios.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what we most want to do is train the trainer. Mm-hmm. We want to train people to lead in their own communities, because what I realized about this kind of thing is you can't create a task org that's going to be effective operating decentralized like this. Mm-hmm. What you can do is empower people. You can educate them, and then you can give them the skill sets to go on their own and develop their own task organ hierarchy within their own communities. And I want people to do that. I want people to raise their hand and go, hey, maybe we should think as a church to put ourselves together in a group,
Yeah.
a neighborhood, a family, whatever it may be. I want to provoke people to start looking at preparedness and their own security and taking control in their own hands and not depending on the government.
So ideally have control, like your local chapters, for lack of a better word, and then also have a network built throughout the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do it geographically. We try to do it by state. It's pretty difficult to do it by state because there's obviously a lot of states. We're vetting people right now. And the idea is when we vet people, we're getting them to a point where I've worked with a lot of sheriff's departments. And to me, the sheriff is the one politician that you could trust more often than not in your community.
Yeah.
They're elected, but they're also a peace officer, but they're inside of the community and they're taking care of the entire county. So if you have a sheriff that's on board and they're looking for help, because listen, law enforcement cannot do this alone.
No.
There's no way.
It's the biggest, I tell people this all the time, it's the biggest misconception in the history of our country that law enforcement has the manpower and the capabilities to defend you in a worst case scenario.
100%.
It's laughable.
Yeah, it
you
is.
know? And not only do they not have the manpower or the equipment, but I'll let you in on a little secret. Lots of cops shoot 2 times a year.
Yeah.
Lots of cops are out of shape.
Yeah.
Lots of cops don't have the will to fight. Like they are not going to be your saviors when shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
You have to be. And that's why this is so compelling, you know?
Even the top tiered guys, like the guys who actually care, which is mostly the guys we train, right? We train the SWAT teams, the SRT teams. Even those guys, because I've been in Jersey, PA, Colorado, training all these SWAT teams recently, and talking to those guys. If you think those guys are going to be the shield between good and evil, you know what they have? They have families.
Yeah.
Dude, if I'm a SWAT dude and shit's burning to the ground, you know where I'm going? To my house to protect my family.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
No, and the other, I mean, like my department, a lot, and this is common nationwide, is they have SWAT teams that are made up of several different departments.
Yeah,
right?
regionals. Yep.
So they have a regional SWAT team called Valley SWAT, and I'm not sure how many members they have, but I think it's like 20. Mm-hmm. Like you think
it's very small.
You think 20 dudes in the whole region are going to be able to keep anything together?
Yeah.
No, of course not.
Yeah. It's what's scary is we've already lost control. Mm-hmm. And these pockets, like you said, are getting emboldened. But what's happening is you have like TMZ. They came out this morning, and I posted on American Contingency, and did this whole write-up. And the write-up was calling this person who defended his life in his own community from people from outside the community. I got one of the rap sheets on one of the guys who was the kid who hit him with a skateboard, and he's the first dude who got shot. That guy has a rap sheet a mile long. And
impossible.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so as this stuff lines out, the problem that we have is now everybody's emboldened because TMZ's calling this guy a white vigilante, right? So they're making it a race issue. They're saying,
well, he has to be a supremacist if he stands up for anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And now what's happening is this will create more propaganda, which will spread like wildfire, and then you'll have more pockets of violence. I mean, it's a Tuesday night. Like Friday, I expect it. But Tuesday now?
Well, dude, let's go back to what even caused these. Because I actually have a bone to pick with you. You cost me like 500 Instagram followers.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, because you brought up the Jacob Blake thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I talked about that. And I wasn't even like going in. You did like a 40-minute video, breaking it down.
Yeah.
And I just said, listen, let me tell you guys something. Lots of people keep guns underneath their cars or underneath their front seat in their car.
Yeah.
You know? And there's a lot of things that led up to why that cop shot that guy. And things need to be investigated. That's why he's put on leave, and those things take weeks. Yep. So for us to see an Instagram video and have all the facts, I'm obviously not saying that I have that. But the frustrating thing for me is that every single time a guy does something like that, fighting the cops, I believe he verbalized he wanted to kill him.
He did, yeah.
And started running to a place that could likely have a weapon stashed. No responsibility on that guy. None at all.
None at all.
Hey,
he's got $1 million in his GoFundMe account right now.
Yeah. It's overwhelmingly easy to comply with law enforcement. And I've arrested plenty of dudes with warrants, and 9 times out of 10, they just say, "You got me. It's all good." And they put their hands behind their back. Those dudes aren't getting shot.
Yeah.
If you think the cops are out there being bloodthirsty and looking for people to kill, show me the videos where people are complying and they're taking them out behind a car and dumping them.
So
it's not happening.
This might be a break-in because I just got this, which is I just got the police scanner audio where 911 was called against Jacob Blake. And I don't even know, like, this is fresh. Like, I literally just got this text. So this is
breaking news.
It said Kenosha police opened fire less than 5 minutes after being called. Scanner audio. And here's what it says. It says, a scanner audio indicates that police opened fire on 29-year-old Jacob Blake less than 5 minutes after they were initially contacted. In cell phone video shared widely on social media, Blake can be seen being followed by 2 officers with weapons drawn as he opens his car door and leans inside. One of the officers grabs Blake by the back of his shirt and 7 shots can be heard. Blake remains in serious condition. According to the audio obtained by Madison 365, someone called police to report that Blake was at her home and wasn't supposed to be, and that he had taken her keys and was refusing to give them back. A dispatcher relayed this message to patrol officers at 511. About 30 seconds later, she let patrol officers know that there was an alert on the address for a 99 for this subject, apparently to indicate that a warrant had been issued for Blake's arrest. Court records indicate a warrant was issued on 3 charges, 2 misdemeanors and 1 G-class felony, which was sexual assault 3rd degree, which is rape. Court records indicate no previous criminal charges in the state of Wisconsin. About a minute after the initial call, the dispatcher indicated that Blake was leaving the premises and the woman who had initially called had hung up. 5 minutes after the initial call, officer could be heard reporting shots fired as everything unfolded. But what's crazy is about 40 seconds after the report that shots had been fired, an officer on the scene requested rescue ASAP, presumably for Blake. And 2 minutes after the shots fired call, another officer reported that all officers in the scene are okay, and they saved his ass.
Yeah.
So what's crazy is this dude's got $1 million in the bank for GoFundMe. The rape charge, and he has his day in court, but he was charged with that class 3 felony, which is G in Wisconsin, for rape. The girl, 14 years old. So they charged him with criminal trespassing and then disorderly conduct, as well as the rape charge. Then they get called, and this is coming from law enforcement as a source. So I don't know if it's confirmed because I haven't correlated or got any fidelity on it. But when they showed up on the scene, he supposedly had a knife in his hand, and they told him to drop the knife. They tased him. Now, and this is all, again, hearsay and speculation until it's been confirmed in the investigation. They tased him. He didn't drop the knife. He broke away from the tase. In fact, you could see the second officer pursuing has a taser in his hand, not a gun. And then he walks away. They tell him to drop it, and he said he's going to kill him, and he said he's going to shoot them. So he's walking with his hands masked, one holding the knife, which is, there's a screen capture of him holding the knife.
I saw that one.
And then he goes to lean into the car to reach inside.
I mean, he's articulating his intent.
100%.
Means, opportunity, and intent.
Yeah.
And now he's gaining the means to do that. That's what he's telling them.
People don't understand that there's a scale of mitigation of risk. Like, people think that when a cop pulls a gun on somebody that they're intimidating them. No, he's giving you a clear demand signal.
Yeah.
Which is, I'm going to give you options, which 90% of the time, there's actually a statistic on it, 90% of the time reduces risk, means it mitigates it, because the point in which you get a gun pointed at you and you're a criminal and you don't want any, like you're not going to escalate your level of violence, you'll stop. But then there is a percentage that happens to be the 10% of people that do escalate force, and then they go hands-on. Out of that, it's a very small number. It's like 1.something% of people who are actually physically engaged, whether with a firearm, taser, mace, or physically engaged with an officer. So this guy, leading up to this moment, had all these opportunities. But looking at the victim mentality of how this unfolded, this dude's a victim.
Yeah. No, I mean, I stopped looking at comments when people just start spewing hate, but I had so many people who are like, I started following you because I thought you were one of the good cops, and now you're just blindly supporting cops like the rest of them. Like, oh, your brother's in blue, blah, blah, blah. It's
wow.
like, and it's like, listen, I can speak out against cops doing shitty things.
Yeah.
And then I can also speak out against people doing shitty things.
100%.
Those two things aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
It's not like I back the blue or like no matter what the rioters or protesters do, it's all good. Like this shit's nuanced.
Yeah.
You know? But so that incident, again, is what fucking spiked last night's events.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I'm very, look, when I get associated with right wingers, it kind of bums me out, right? Because I grew up in the hood. I grew up on the black side of the tracks. Like my Uncle Weaver is a black dude. You know, I have black and Korean cousins. It bums me out when they put you in these boxes because that's what they want to do, right? They have nowhere to go. So they put you in a box and then they just write you off. I mean, Antifa in Texas just called me like a racist right winger who's training people to kill people.
Yeah, you showed me that right before we got started.
Come on, man. It's like,
it's just kind of a compliment.
I know. It's like, I mean, you hold me in that, like people say Mike was part of the deep state. Man, if you work for the government, you realize there's nothing deep about the state.
There's no deep state.
There's no.
Dude, I've been confronting all that shit too after my video blew up. All these conspiracy theories, how I'm a paid actor. I'm not even in a real patrol car. Like all this just deep state stuff, Masonic
blue
stuff.
Screen, man.
Like people go fucking nuts. And that's because they don't have anything real to entertain them and use up their time. So they just start fucking creating these rabbit holes. But yeah, man, like, and you're Korean.
I know.
And they're telling you you're white supremacist.
I'm a freaking minority. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like people, it's actually, you can see the comment thread on the Antifa stuff and people are like, yeah, he's a right winger. He's a white supremacist. And then some dude's like, he's actually like, he's a minority. Like he's Asian. He's like, oh, whatever. He's still a supremacist. Like, come on, man.
But dude, that's part of the tactic. If you are a patriot in any capacity and you believe in liberty and you believe in protecting people, then they have to paint you to be just this fucking raging psycho.
Yeah.
Because guys like us are standing against what they want to push and they have to turn everybody against you.
It's fear and intimidation, man. I just saw a video of this and there's clips of it, but there's this lady, she's I don't know if it's a restaurant. It looks like kind of like a Subway, but everybody's raising their right fist because, you know, they're showing solidarity, whatever they want to do for their social justice movement. And it's a whole bunch of white people, by the way, which I think is funny. I think it's funny that 1 in 6 people at Black Lives Matter protest are black. 1 in 6.
Yeah.
So you have all this white guilt and they're raising their hands. And there's a couple people holding cell phones, videotaping her, and she's refusing to raise her hand. And these are people who represent either anti-fascism or a movement of their choice. That literally is fascism, right?
Yeah.
They're controlling the message. They're shouting people down, and if anybody disagrees, then they're fascists, but they'll use fascist tactics to suppress their own voices, even violence. I mean, that's what Nazi Germany did to everybody it didn't agree with.
Well, and that's what you keep seeing over and over and over with these groups. The things that they say they stand against, well, they implement them when it benefits them. Just like the Chaz thing. Checkpoints, walls, like there was people in there like enforcing rules and like checking IDs and stuff.
Yeah, that's called dictatorship, socialism, communism, everything you don't want.
But if the government is involved in any of that kind of stuff, you know, if the government wants to check your ID or put up a checkpoint or put up a wall, it's just fucking everybody loses their minds. And inside of a week, they're doing all those things. That's you know?
I look at patterns and trends from stuff that I did overseas. So when I was in Libya, when I was in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, all these shitholes, there was a commonality amongst all of them, which is what I'm seeing now. There's the lack of leadership. When you have the lack of leadership and governance and sovereignty, you have a void. In that void, opportunists, like you said, fill that gap. Because look, when you see a gap, you want to fill it, figuratively and literally, right? That's how we roll.
We want to fill.
We want to fill all gaps. So these people go, oh man, this is an opportunity. And like you said, this is an opportunity for them to use the guys to get access and placement to people. And so it's funny because the left politicians are using it as the perfect storm to assimilate or divide, in this case, the country, so they could assimilate the votes for the win.
Of course.
But these small groups that they're pandering to are literally coming into this with the same Marxist ideology, the same idea to burn the country to the ground. And this isn't, when I heard people talking shit about Black Lives Matter, I went, man, I remember my initial reaction, which is, this is inappropriate. Like, Black lives do matter. So, man, maybe they're standing up for something right. Then I started doing research. I listened to every single speech that both the founders of Black Lives Matter started. I read a book on Karl Marx. I listened to an audiobook on, like, an unbiased audiobook that was objectively looking at Marx. And then if you read about me, the About Me section on Black Lives Matter's page, it lays out exactly what they're about, which is literally laying out the destruction of the American system, the American democracy. Because Karl Marx believed that American capitalism, which is really Western capitalism, was founded on the slave trade and the trading and the selling of human beings. So when you look at Marxist ideology tied to Black Lives Matter, they literally looked at Karl Marx because of that ideology. And so they think capitalism is wrong. They even state in there About Me that the structure, the family unit and structure, needs to be broken down and destroyed. And that's paraphrasing.
Yeah,
but
I've seen that though.
But so when you see that, and then you see anti-fascists who are jumping on the BLM train to get access and placement to burn stuff down, these people are not doing this to burn a city down, a dealership down, beating a person because they are emotionally tied into that. It is an overall campaign and insurgency to destroy America inside out. So when you see that in insurgencies overseas, we have something called counterterrorism, because you need a counterinsurgency to destroy or put out the fire before it starts to assimilate and gets out of control. Because the next steps in that are rural neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Occupation. To me, that's one of the worst case scenarios. Because what do you do when one of these groups, they decide they want to get very strategic and deliberate in their campaign, and they go into a government and they take and overthrow a local government? So then you have the federal responsibility, which is probably every federal counterterrorism organization, including the HRT. They come and they go, okay, what are we doing here? So now you have a disaffected group that has taken power, and they've essentially done a coup, and then they get control. Well, as we've seen with pandering that's going on in these pockets of these disaffected people, we're allowing them to do whatever the fuck they want to do.
Yep.
So then what happens when they take over and they put in their own enforcement, their own soldiers, their own units, their own organization, and then they have logistical support? Because now they've taken over all the patrol vehicles, all the buildings, the interwebs. What are we going to do? Well, if that gets too big, one troop or one squadron or the entire FBI or HRT isn't enough to go in there.
Yep.
Then you send the National Guard. And then what's going to happen? A freaking war.
And we all know that the National Guard
Dude,
is as incapable as they come.
that's the scariest thing to me.
That's just the reality of it.
You have a private who just got out of basic training, and his 15-year-old vet, like, who's a E4, who's his squad leader.
Yeah.
Dude, it's insane. So this is the perfect recipe for allowing something that a lot of people write off as small, that could be very serious in the near future. I mean, very serious.
Well, and if you don't put out the fire now, then you're going to have to confront it in 6 or 8 months. And it may have grown into a monster.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like that's kind of what a lot of people are doing, just putting it on the back burner. Oh, it's not affecting me. It's not my city. But like we talked about before we even started recording, they are moving into rural neighborhoods and making demands and like intimidating people. Like, it's happening now. That's not an idea anymore.
Yeah. When I think that, for me, at least in my local community, look, if I was in Portland, in the rural community of Portland, and that happened, I would be on the streets doing defensive tactics to protect my community. And if that happens where I'm going in Utah, me and all the men that work for me will be doing the same. So what are people supposed to do? Well, you have to start building that network.
Yeah.
You have to start looking at who's an asset and who potentially is a liability, and start working together to come up with a plan. Because if you don't have a plan and you're not allocating resources, you're not assembling resources, then you, by time it happens, are going to be too late.
Yeah.
And that to me, especially for like single mothers, even families who just, I don't want to mess with the gun, I don't want to touch a weapon, or I'm not into preparedness, like that freaks me out. You need to step up. You have to.
And I've told this story on my podcast before, but I'll tell you. I had a young mom at the bus stop one day, and she's like, "Hey, man."
This is when you're a police officer?
No, yeah, it was a little while ago. So, yeah, I was a cop at the time. And she's like, "Hey, Greg, I just want to let you know that me and her husband's name said he put like 300 pounds of rice in our garage. Just in case this stuff goes bad, we want food for the family." And I'm like, "Hey, let me let you in on a little secret. Don't be at the bus stop telling people about your 300 pounds of rice, right? Like, what are you doing right now?"
Yeah.
And she goes, "Well, my husband actually told me to tell you because he knows you have lots of guns and we don't have any guns." And I'm like, "You're building alliances."
Yeah.
At the bus stop. That's a soccer mom building alliances at the bus stop. But that's a real thing. That's that's where people are at. They're concerned about this stuff now.
That's what people should be doing.
Yeah.
Right. When it's funny because on the we had like 300 people come out for the American Contingency meet in Washington, and it was on the Washington side, but right across the river was Oregon. And when I was talking to them after I was done, a guy came up to me and he talked to me about the social networking aspect. And he said, "Hey, what's the scale? Like if you're scaling a social network, where should we stop scaling?" And I actually thought about that, and that made a lot of sense to me, right? If you have an organization and you have a task organization building command and control, like efficiency, there is a scale in which it becomes efficient, and then too many people becomes disaffected. It
starts to water it down.
It starts to water it down.
Yeah.
Like your efficiency becomes almost irrelevant because you have too many people. And I was watching a documentary last night on the Druid Pack. I'm into wolves. But the Druid Pack had 37 wolves in it. It's the largest recorded pack of wolves, started by a wolf named Wolf 21, who had 2 wolf wives. And
stud.
Yeah, he was a stud, man. He actually had a third one after that, but he had 2. He might have been a Mormon wolf. He had 2 wolf wives. So what he does is he dens both of them. They had separate dens. One of the wolves, who's a boss, she was like she was the alpha female controlling all the packs in Yellowstone prior to this happening, and he was an outsider. He courted her, and then brought in the sister. And then he courted his sister. The sister, one night, killed her, the alpha female of Yellowstone. And so then he consolidated packs or dens, which isn't common.
Yeah.
So he started collecting the wolves and bringing them together.
I was just going to say he should consolidate the dens.
He did, because they wanted they're allocating they're consolidating and allocating their resources appropriately.
What's the name of this documentary? Do you remember?
So it's just, if you look up Wolf 21, the Druid Pack,
okay,
which is it's actually a piece of terrain, Druid Hill in Yellowstone, and so then he consolidates the den. He's got 37 wolves. Well, as they start going through the seasons, they start they're breaking off anything they come across. Elk, buffalo, or bison, anything they come across, they're annihilating. But when winter hits, they start reducing, it starts reducing their resources because of the animals, and they can't get enough. Mm-hmm. So they have to break apart their pack and create small packs in order to survive, which is what they did.
Got it.
Because
they're relying on the leadership of one wolf to feed too many of them.
Too many of them. So when you're creating this social network, it's a good point. What I would do is, if you are in a community, you should have around 15 to 30 people, including like a husband and wife is 2, right? Because the husband might be the defender. He might be the protector. So he knows how to operate guns. But the wife, even if she's not a protector or defender, she might know how to take care of people.
Yep.
She might know how to do medical first aid and trauma because she's the nurse. So that's 2. So 15 to 30 is the number that I came up with, which is a platoon size element to be able to allocate resources and not overextend your abilities. Because at a point with multiple houses and neighborhoods, it becomes too much that you can't even manage on commo, right? If you ever you've done a company size op, it's a big command and control nightmare. But if you start doing battalion size ops, it's like, forget about it. We have to operate decentralized. So you could operate as a platoon and be effective. When you start getting overextended, the max is about a company size element. We're looking at 60 to 90 people. And then beyond that, anything beyond that, you have to operate decentralized and broken down into groups. I would just look at your community. If it's a church versus your neighborhood, you need to have the right people, and dividing and conquering is the way in which you're going to succeed.
So when you're talking about capabilities, like the husband may have tactics, the wife may have medical, what would you prioritize to people that are listening that may not have anything right now, and they're looking at the writing on the wall, trying to figure out what they need to do in case shit hits the fan? What would you recommend?
So one of the most important things that it stems really in military operations, but I'm realizing we haven't paid enough attention to it, and we are now, is communication. Right? You know, if we're on a military operation and we don't have comms, we have nothing. You know, if we depend on the close air support above us, but we also depend on the lifeline, which is the communication that we're able to communicate our location. And I've been in those circumstances where you lose communication with those assets and you're shit out of luck. So we're actually building an American Contingency commo group, which includes doing ham radio operations and having a way to communicate without cell phones. Because, you know, you could actually go on americancontingency.locals.com and download the Locals app and be able to intercommunicate with people on GSM or CDMA. But when shit hits the fan, that infrastructure could fall apart. And you need the ability in your own little network. Let's just say it's your neighborhood. Well, how are you going to communicate? Are you on a group chat? And if you're on a group chat, let's say you're on, I don't know, well, what's a group chat? Let's say you're
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp. WhatsApp's a big one. Let's say you're on WhatsApp and you have everybody grouped in and you're doing rehearsals, like you're doing a call, and then you simulate or rendezvous at a position. What happens if that goes down? So
everything you've worked for is combat ineffective.
Yeah, you're completely done. So you have to have, I recommend VHF, like simple walkie-talkie plans, but also have a no comms plan. Like the idea is, let's say we have no comms.
Just like a rally point.
Hits the fan and things are going down. Well, let's have a plan of action where we physically rendezvous, or if we don't rendezvous and people do rendezvous, we know those people might be in distress.
So they're our first priority.
They're our first priority. It's that contingency plan doing like a reconnaissance. It's like me and Steve are going to go out and do a recon. If we're not back in 20 minutes, if you don't hear from us, do a combo shot every 10 minutes. That contingency way of thinking is going to save our asses, because it might not be just the physical security plan or the plan of action for actually responding to a crisis. The communication might be the link to say, hey, there's a mob of 500 people coming into our neighborhood. We got to break contact. Which I do recommend. Like you're not defending against the zombie apocalypse, which would be the real version of that. You might not have enough ammo, enough training, enough wherewithal to survive something like that.
Do you remember the military acronym REMIKISS?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
That's
do.
all about contingency planning.
That is.
Right?
That was that troop leading procedures. Receive the mission, issue the warning order.
Yeah.
Make a tentative plan.
Wow. If you can rattle this off, I'll be impressed.
Yeah. What is it? Start movement. And then it's complete the plan, issue the warning order. And then is it start movement? I think it's start movement after that.
Shape movement.
Yeah. I love that shit.
I think supervise the last
Supervise,
one.
That's it. That's the yes. But that kind of stuff, that kind of process is how we should be thinking.
No, I love that you're saying this, because I was actually, there's going to be a question that I had for you, because being a former Ranger, they break it down to us in basic training. What are we screaming? Shoot, move, communicate. right? And the shooting aspect of it, if you've been shooting for 20 years, it's pretty easy.
It's the easiest.
Right? Moving, that's your fitness, that's your vehicles, that's having, it speaks for itself. The ability to move, flank, E&E, all of these things, right? Again, pretty easy, I feel like, but communicate.
Yeah.
And I was actually just thinking about this with some of my friends a month or two ago. So we went out and bought the Baofangs.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to operate it yet.
Yeah.
But I feel like at least having it, worst case scenario, we can start to figure it out. But I want to get up to speed on that stuff. There was a local ham radio school, but of course it's shut down because of COVID.
Yeah.
I guess on the internet you can self-train.
So that Baofeng is a great radio because you could do reception of comms without having a license, a ham radio license. And getting your ham radio license, you can now do, because of COVID, you could do it online.
Okay.
And, I recommend Ham Radio Crash Course as the source for that. Josh Nasi, who would be a great podcast, by the way. He's a great dude. He's kind of in our network, but he's the subject matter expert on all this.
Where's he out of?
He's out of Cali.
Okay.
He's out of SoCal, I believe. But the way he educates, especially in survival, is that a radio like that is how you receive communications, because FEMA, government organizations, and then a lot of people who are on ham radio base stations are going to be communicating in the open, and you'll be able to hear that. But you don't. When shit hits the fan, you actually don't need a call sign to be able to communicate. I mean, technically it's illegal, but we're talking the worst
who
case.
cares?
Who gives a
that's
shit?
the last of your worries.
So in fact, I do recommend that people get that radio. I don't remember the nomenclature off the top of my head. It's the 5 something. I have one in my go bag.
It's on Amazon for like $60.
Dude, it's super cheap. You get the one I bought. It's the little blue one. They're like $25. I bought like 20 of them for everybody in my company, because we have now a means in populating a frequency. My long-term plan is to have, and this is probably in the next 6 months, is have a frequency dedicated for American Contingency.
Okay.
Because the cool thing about ham radio is you could use relay stations, which are all over the United States.
That was my next question.
To hop the freak to be able to communicate across open space.
So they have that already pre-established then?
Yeah.
It's basically repeaters that we can communicate nationwide?
They do.
What about having your own repeater, like a vehicle-mounted repeater, something like that? Do you?
Yes, do that, because I have one in my truck, and the reason I do is because you get more amps, so it amplifies it more as a signal.
Got it.
Which increases your range.
If you wouldn't mind, actually just kind of break down how that works and what a repeater is, because there's people listening that have never even heard that word before.
Yeah, so the way radios work is they use wave propagation, and the way waves translate or travel through the air is in different types of that propagation, or different types of waves, and some are more efficient than others. So when you send a signal, which is this wave, the reason it dissipates is because of different things like terrain, right? If you have a hill in line of sight communication, which means you could see the other person, and then they're on the other side of the hill. If you don't have a way for that wave to hit a transmission station, then it can't be relayed. And the way a relay station works is really how cell phone towers in America works. It takes in the information, which is in this case the signal, which is the reception of it, and then retransmits the signal and pushes it down on the other side. So if you have a relay station at the top of a hill, which they typically are higher in elevation, you could be in the dark and not have any communication with anybody line of sight. You blast the signal, which is your voice. It hits the relay station and then bounces it back down to the other person's handset, which in this case would be another ham radio station. Well, the cool thing is now these radios are tethered to the internet. So now, Josh, when he was here, he was communicating to somebody in Japan from here.
Wow.
So he had the ability to hit a radio station that had, some kind of cell phone infrastructure, bounce that radio signal to one of that person's station via their cell phone tower, and then retransmit that on to that guy's radio, and they could hear somebody in Japan talking Japanese from Prescott, Arizona.
That's so cool.
It's so badass, man. It's the way that we did. It's the way the regiment, it's the way that we do what's called over the horizon communication, which means I'm talking to potentially a satellite or a cell phone tower that's blasting that signal and retransmitting it to somebody else somewhere on the ground. And that's super important now with everything going on.
Yeah. Is there a specific brand or anything you'd recommend for the vehicle mounted repeater?
So the best ones are, look, Baofeng is controversial in the ham radio nerd world, right? They are because they what they do is they're Chinese made. They don't have restrictions, and they allow you to open scan the ham radio networks.
So all the ham radio people who've been doing this for 30 years probably hate that.
They hate that.
Okay.
But secretly they love it. What they hate that it's open and that people can get into it. But they do that because that's part of their abilities to stay tuned in. But they don't like that somebody else could buy it and then just simply openly receive like a scanner, like a police scanner.
Yeah.
And it does cause issues, right? Because somebody can go out and buy an Amazon Chinese radio and then immediately start transmitting without a call sign, and it becomes, saturated as a network, and so you can get some stupid stuff.
So I've heard it's illegal to transmit without a ham radio license, but what does that mean?
So they can't geolocate you. It's not like they're going to DF to your location.
So there's nothing that they can determine this is you and send you some fine or something crazy.
So they can't if they deliberately did it. But if you did it in the blind and then you rolled, nothing would happen. It's just to mitigate. There's like a fine. They want to mitigate the number of people doing it.
So it's kind of a gentleman's agreement.
It is. I recommend for the vehicle setup, it's a company called, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, it's Yaesu. And they have a very good system that you could digitally scan from your truck. It does use an amplifier, so you get more reach and more gain, which is the gain. So I like that because if I'm going down the road and I could openly listen, I could hear if somebody's got an SOS signal, if somebody's sucking, if somebody's hurting. I could scan it like an airplane scans for an SOS signal. So I think that's super important. And then remember, when me and you were trying to communicate somebody on an in-bidder, we just went to higher elevation and then retransed. Well, in the civilian world, when you're dealing with all this shit going on, the best capability for you is your mobility platform, your rig.
Yep.
So if I could just simply drive to high elevation in my community and then retransfer my truck, that's better than going, oh shit, the nearest hill is like 5 miles away.
Yeah.
And then I got to walk with my handset, right?
As long as your alternator doesn't go out.
Dude, I'm literally going to carry an extra alternator now. That shit put me down hard.
Yeah, that's funny, man.
That's so freaking crazy.
What about, you mentioned the in-biter, if we were, worst case scenario, I remember when we were patrolling Afghanistan, you could always switch it over to SATCOM.
Yeah.
Is there any type, I know you can go to REI and buy SATCOM, but is there any type of network?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I was in Libya as a contractor, I used to use civilian networks like Thuraya. The cool thing with those networks is they're overseas. And the reason I say that's cool is because if the infrastructure collapsed here, and let's say you're using an inReach, like that spot device, which is REI, and it's used for SOS, but you could text, and it depends on some kind of infrastructure.
Yeah.
If that was shut down, the first place it'd be shut down is in the U.S. because it's based here.
Yeah.
So you want to use a system that's direct line of sight to a satellite. So like a Thuraya, because if I'm standing out in the open and I need to communicate to anybody, and I can hit that satellite, then I'm able to retransit satellite to anywhere that phone's at. That's super advantageous now because you can reach out and call anybody in the world, but you can call out to people, your grandmother, your father, your community in another state. So I recommend that as a contingency because you could get one of those phones pretty cheap, and then you can get the cards and only activate it when you need it.
Got it.
And I have one at the house and I use that, and all in, you could probably find one for $500, but that $500 cell phone is good kind of forever.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just use it when you have to in an emergency.
And if the grid goes down, is that phone only going to be capable to call other Iridiums or Thurayas, or can you reach out to other comm sources through that?
So if like I can tell most people in most cities depend on a local infrastructure, and that is decentralized. So if your cell phone tower goes down, it's because your grid went down, and it won't affect other people's grids. And because there's it's not like everything's intertied or interwoven.
Yeah.
So it's not like one switch. That's a good thing, because if the system goes down, it goes down in spots. So if you have that iridium, you could communicate outside of your grid very easily.
Got it.
But if you have a cell phone, forget about it. It's a brick.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if shit hits a fan in LA and you have your iridium, you're still going to be able to hit up people in Atlanta.
Absolutely. Because, a lot of people don't understand the way this infrastructure works. CDMA and GSM cell phones, GSM uses a SIM card, CDMA uses the tower, and then the what's called IMEI of the cell phone itself. All this is piggybacked off of the infrastructure that's built into cell phone towers. So when that cell phone tower goes down, you have no relay, you have no ability to transmit, and you have no ability to communicate. That's why when you drive, you'll lose reception, then gain reception, because you're connecting to a new cell phone tower that's taking on the allocation of your network, your data, your voice, etc. So if your tower goes down, your cell phone's a brick. So the only way you get back up is if you go and find another tower. And so if the grid you're on goes down, it's likely to take out multiple towers, and you would have to go far, far away. A iridium-based or sat-based communication set literally looks at the satellite and transmits the signal. That's why they have those big antennas to the satellite, and then relays it to wherever it's at in the world.
Yeah.
Which is pretty fucking crazy.
And I think it's important to emphasize, like, the grid going down doesn't mean zombie apocalypse. Like, I remember, I was in Ranger School on 9/11, but I heard there was no phone calls going out of New York at the time just because the system was overloaded.
Yeah.
Or I remember when I lived in Southern California, if we had an earthquake, sometimes it'd be a few minutes before you could make a phone call because everybody's checking in on everybody. Everybody's calling everybody. The system gets overloaded.
It's so fragile as a system. My house up in Prescott in the Pines, if it snows there, I lose all electricity. If the electricity goes down because my phone uses my Wi-Fi as a booster, it all goes down. So I have no cell phone reception, even though otherwise I typically would. If I lose electricity, completely gone. Mm-hmm. So most people don't realize they're very dependent, not just on the cell phone network and the grid that they're on, but just the electricity and the Wi-Fi systems that are tethered to each other. Your cell phone uses Wi-Fi adaptation to send large packets of information. So most cell phones, even as a network, aren't dependent on a tower network. They're dependent on electricity that runs through the Wi-Fi that's tethered to your phone.
I see.
That's the iCloud, right? The cloud is all based on Wi-Fi interaction. So you lose simple electricity in your house, gone. The electricity goes out in your town, gone. An infrastructure collapse, forget about it. Not even close. You have nothing, which is crazy.
Now, what about, like I told you, I got a giant diesel tank with it's probably a 300-gallon tank, and I want to build it into a trailer. And I was thinking inside of that trailer, because I have friends out in Idaho, right? My oh shit plan is get the women and children to the ranch in Idaho and then reconfigure from there and maybe start running operations or whatever. But it's almost like a go bag, except it's your vehicle, right?
Yeah.
What would you recommend in that?
Yeah. So we have what's called pillars of preparedness. We break this stuff down. The first pillar is yourself as an individual. We call it your person. Most people don't know what that term means. We know what that means. Yeah. But so your person is the first pillar. The second pillar is mobility. And mobility, we look at mobility, well, me and you were in the military, as an extension of a rucksack, right? You look at capacity, which is how much space do you have, which literally lines out your capability. So if you have, for example, even if you have a Honda Civic and your trunk's empty, then you're at a disadvantage because that trunk needs to have You can get a 5-gallon small tank at Home Depot that you could cap off, that you'll never smell a fume, won't be dangerous, that will give you at 30 miles per gallon, 150 additional miles if you break down, right? Extending your range. If you carry a tourniquet on your person, then you should just carry an aid bag in your trunk because it's not taking up any space. That space would be empty. So I think like what you lined out it is an extension of your capability. And it's so important that people start thinking about that because you can have a $100,000 Raptor. And if you only have a quarter tank of gas with no access to gas anywhere because gas will become a commodity really quick because it will be a scarce resource. Even if electricity goes down, a lot of the pumps don't have backup generators and they depend on electricity to pump the gas out of the tank. Unless you're really good at siphoning through a garden hose, then you'll be at a disadvantage. So
even if you think you're going to roll up with your ARs and take gas by force, it's non-operational.
It's not operational. So what I do is my start point is what you said in the fuel. You know, I have a 150-gallon tank in the truck, and then I have 30 gallons in other vehicles. I just got this Land Cruiser in 06. I'm putting a 30-gallon on that one. It's so important, man, because your range is determined by your fuel, but your range is critical to your survival because that is the logistical train. Mm-hmm. We're doing mobility courses with horses and how to pack out goats because very rapidly, like in an instance, we could be taken back to those days. It does not take a long time to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was in Libya, there's dudes running around on mules. And I'm like, is that normal? Like, no, but what are you going to do? When the fuel isn't available because of the oil issues, because of Gaddafi being pulled out of position, and then this void, this vacuum of all these terrorists taking over everything, dude, you quickly get thrown back into the Stone Ages, which we should be doing anyway. You should know how to do that stuff. Like if you don't know how to saddle a horse, if you don't know how to do primitive survival, you might want to start looking at it.
Yeah. No, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot just personally because, again, it's easy to think because, as a ranger and I've done this many deployments, but I'm not starting a fire with 2 sticks.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I don't know. And people get this misconception that the military teaches you survivability.
It doesn't.
It teaches you how to be part of a machine.
Yes.
And that machine, 9 times out of 10, is taking care of you.
Yep.
You know, people are like, oh, you went to ranger school, so you know how to skin rabbits and all. I'm like, no.
Green Beret, like when I went to ranger school, which doesn't teach you literally anything in survival, I was like, man, this is it taught me how to suffer.
Yeah.
Right? How to get used to the suck and lead men in the worst case scenario. But even as a Green Beret, survival schools, all this stuff, man, I wasn't a snake eater. And even I've been to every JSOC, USAFIC, in CIA. I've been to every SEER school, every one of their survival schools. I think I went to 12 survival schools. Not one of those courses set me up to be a survivalist in primitive survival. You have to give you exposure. But if you want to be good at that stuff, you actually have to learn it and then make it part of your life or you'll never sustain it.
Yeah, just go out and actually implement it.
You have to implement it, as a hobby.
You ever watch that show Alone?
I do. I love that show.
Okay.
Man. We just podcasted one of the gals and that was on the show.
Oh, on this last season?
Yeah, the last one, I already screwed her name. Winonia. She took second to Jordan.
Oh, okay.
And then we're podcasting Jordan next week.
That's cool, man. Yeah, because I've always been drawn to that kind of stuff. And you watch Naked and Afraid, and you're like, oh, this is a lot of Hollywood bullshit going into it.
Yeah.
And then you watch Alone, and it's like from season 1 to I think what are they on 6 now or whatever.
Such a great show.
You're seeing a huge development in people's capabilities.
Yes.
And you sit there and you watch what people are doing, and you realize, oh, in worst case scenario, I'm not ready.
Yeah. Not even close.
Not even close.
The last one was fascinating because Jordan, he winded up killing 2 moose, mm-hmm. which, a big moose, you're looking at 600 plus pounds of meat. I mean, you could pull a lot of meat off a moose, but also fat.
Yeah.
And he had a gallon, which I believe if you did the math on the calories, that gallon of fat was worth 35,000 calories. A wolverine stole it.
Yeah.
So he gets his fat stolen, which is his supply, and he's just eating a carnivore diet of meat. And you would think with the meat and then he supplemented it with fish that he's doing well. He wasn't.
Starving to death.
He was starving to death.
Isn't it called rabbit starvation?
It is.
Yeah.
Because too high of protein. He can't get the amino acids and the right nutrition. And so he's basically, his body is feeding on itself because it has no other source of fats, amino acids, and the protein is not enough. It's so bizarre, man, that you would see a dude who has bagged
600 pounds of meat
and
hanging
sitting
up,
on it,
starving to death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, and that's, I listened to him. I watched that season and then watched him on Rogan as well.
Yeah.
And if you listen to that guy's life, it's a lifetime of developing those skills out on like the Siberian tundra and whatnot. That's not something you can put together in 6 months.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We have to long-term plan this shit. Like you said, going to Idaho, having a bug out contingency plan is super critical, because if you don't, you'll end up in that circumstance where you have no resources.
Yeah.
Bugging out, where like we say bugging out, you know, and we used to plan evasion corridors for units, for individuals, depending on the op. But all that is finding a way to get out of a bad circumstance into a better one, and then coming up with that plan and being ready to execute it.
Yeah.
If you don't have an idea, especially living in a metropolitan area with what's going on, you are behind the power curve. I've done podcasts, we've done videos on bugging out. We run courses. We just ran one last week, bugging out on foot. It is the one skill set which I always heard about and I never took seriously until we started doing like low vis stuff in Yemen and Libya, where I realized now here, which is a semi-permissive environment where things could go wrong, and now it's showing a propensity of actually going wrong, you would need to be prepared to do that.
Yeah.
Whether it's a wildfire in California or mass protest in Portland that turn into something else, you got to be prepared to pop smoke and roll.
Yeah, and in talking to like the people that I'm connected with, that's gonna be your first like point of action is getting away, because most of us have little kids, right? I don't want to interject them into the fight whatsoever. So, do you have kids?
No.
See, so you're ready to just go. Yeah. But the kids, it's a huge thing to think about, because they're going to be, nothing more than a liability until you get them to a secure location. And now you can operate out of there. Yeah.
Kids are the bottom 10% of all casualties in disasters and catastrophes. There's a couple stats. One that's I find really interesting is in outdoor survival, meaning situations where people were lost in the middle of nowhere. Kids ages 0, like being an infant, to 4 months, 4 years, actually have a higher survivability rate in the outdoor survival than hunters. And
they're the most resilient, huh?
Well, what they do is they don't use cognition, right? They're not weighing options. So if a child is cold, they'll crawl into a tree. If a child's hungry, they'll eat. If a child's tired, which I think is one of the most important factors, they'll rest. But what does a hunter do?
Yeah, just keep going.
Just keep going. Right?
Yep.
And their ego, or maybe even bad decision-making, gets put in front of everything primal. And
we're not all Cam Hanes.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not all freaking elite athletes. So, but one of the, and this is John Leach's survival psychology and all the studies of his case studies. At the very bottom of the barrel of living is children in the first place. Men don't become developed primates until they're 25 because their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. So we're just dumb monkeys.
It's crazy to think back, because I turned 40 this year, that I was leading patrols in Afghanistan at 21 years old.
I know, dude.
What?
I know. I was an infantry team leader at 20.
Yeah.
Airborne Ranger qualified, and they trusted me with a whole bunch of shit. And I made, between the ages of 20 and 40, the most mistakes I've made in life, and was a dumbass. And I felt like I'm just getting my shit together, barely.
Yep, me too, man.
But I mean, and you have most of the demographic of people in the streets are sub 25-year-olds.
Yeah.
So
it is. It's the monkey brain.
It's
just
the
going
monkey
wild.
brain going crazy, man. And so kids, the problem with kids is not only do they have the lack of experience, life experience, but they typically make the wrong decisions. So they either can't make it or they make the wrong ones. And what most people don't remember in stress or even catastrophe is that we're talking about making decisions under stress, right? So it's different than making decisions when you're not stressed. We're talking cortisol, neuroepinephrine, adrenaline, and you're in fight or flight often. And so you're just a shit show. And then they're making decisions that are going to save or make or break them. So I think it's important that we take care of our kids. We teach them, but we condition them, because kids can't make the rational decision for themselves, but they take instruction well, just like infantry's in the private or privates in the infantry.
Yeah.
You give them clear, concise instructions, no talk back, no feedback. You're telling them what to do because it's timely and it means their survival ability.
Yeah, I dig that. I'm going to start treating my daughters like Ranger privates when I get home.
Get out.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, there's so much to think about that goes into this.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like jiu-jitsu. You start to train, and then you realize that the door just opens up, and it just gets wider and wider and wider. And there's more and more to understand before you ever get proficient in it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at on this. I'm just opening the door and stepping through. And it's like just maybe my own misconceptions, thinking because I am fit, because I do know how to shoot, that I'll be good. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, no, I don't have SATCOM.
Yeah.
I don't know how to use a ham radio. I don't have these contingencies set up. I don't have a network of people that I can rely on. And that's why I'm trying to make up for lost time. Like I said, came down here because I feel like it's time sensitive. I'm trying to put just, even a shitty plan in place that kind of covers all these bases,
Yeah. People often ask me, like, they say, hey, what next? What do I do? I'm getting overwhelmed. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed thinking about being prepared. That's why we lined out the preparedness. A good start point is looking at yourself. And when we say look at yourself, we mean holistically. We mean the level of fitness that you have, right? Your health and well-being. Sleep is just as important as carrying a pistol every day to me, right? Because if you're not asleep, you're not cognitive and maximizing your potential in that cognition. Yep. So you have to sleep. So if you look at it holistically, the first pillar being yourself, you have to prepare, and that starts with like everyday carry, carrying a tourniquet, carrying first aid and trauma, being smart about situational awareness. The second pillar, which is mobility, which you talked about, and then the third mobility, which is a safe house, like squaring away your physical safe space that you could reinforce to be able to sustain survivability. People often think about survivability in short-term sequences, but it's not if it turns into something long-term and you don't have a plan. Because it could very easily, like 1 hour can turn into 1 week or 1 year even. And that to me is the worst case scenario, is a large time consideration where we're looking at temporary things like addressing a threat with a pistol, but we're not looking at long-term things like having a generator with a fuel consumption that it's going to provide me warmth seasonally in Idaho, So the top bracket of that is mindset. We look at it resilience and preparedness. And the foundation of that is your social network. Just having some structure and things that can take you down a rabbit hole is important. But as long as you're chipping away, I think you're getting to a good place.
Yeah.
Right? Because a guy asked me yesterday, he's like, what else, man? There's so much. I'm focusing on med right now. I'm getting my EMT cert, and then I want to do other. That's good. Keep chipping away. When you're done with your EMT, move on to the next thing. look at your Honda Civic in your driveway, and think about what you could do to make that more of an asset to enable you to bug out, enable you to protect your life. It's the cool thing is it's a lifestyle. It's not just a technical script or a technical behavior. It is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
You got to live it if you want to be serious about it.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that, man. And it's funny how a lot of people have these misconceptions on the importance of these different aspects that you're mentioning. Like I was talking about fitness being part of like combat preparedness just a couple days ago. And this guy comments, he goes, bro, this isn't Game of Thrones anymore. We're not fighting with swords and axes. We're fighting with rifles. You don't need fitness. I was like,
wow.
Well, you've never been in any type of combat engagement.
Exactly.
And this is what I always tell people. Not only, like, I can give you 1,000 situations where I may need to drag my buddy across a street or carry him to an evac vehicle, right? But the other thing, even when I was in the fittest of my life deployed, there'd be scenarios where like I'd get this huge adrenaline dump. And I remember trying to get my crosshairs on a guy and it was just dancing around. I couldn't get a good sight picture. I was embarrassed about it because I was like, dude, you're a fucking ranger. What's going on right now? But sometimes you can't control the chemical reaction that your body's having. Mm-hmm. And I was super fired up. And it's like, the more you take care of your body, I feel like the more you can control its responses to situations. But yeah, if you just fuel it with shit and never train, and then you think like you're going to be able to confront a fight or flight moment like that, you're going to be so much farther behind the power curve.
Yeah, they go hand in hand, right? Your central nervous system, your brain is connected to your body. Mm-hmm. The unfortunate thing is both of those medical industries and medical like professionalisms, they haven't been able to get on the same sheet of music because they separate the two entities.
Yeah.
And like a physiological approach is like, oh, that's weird because you have neuroscientists and then you have biologists and they're focused on different parts. But I think you can't have one without the other. Your brain, being fit is going to lead to a healthier brain.
It's housed in this thing.
Exactly.
You know? I
heard something, somebody was just saying it on a podcast recently, and he was a neuroscientist talking about your eyes, for example. And when you're a baby and you're being developed as an infant, your head or your brain is literally crushed or evolving and pushes your eyes out of your brain. So your eyes are actually brain matter. They originate as brain matter. So when you see the world around you and you perceive that, your eye isn't separate from your brain. Your perception of the world is literally being read by your brain. Mm-hmm. It's literally part of your brain.
That's crazy.
So when you think about staying healthy and being healthy and fit, fitness is weird to even say it that way because people should understand fitness doesn't just tie to physical movement or performance. That's a holistic approach.
Yeah.
Fitness is eating right, or staying hydrated, getting enough sleep, and that level of fitness. I mean, I remember when we went to 2 to 3K offsets for surreptitious approaches on targets to doing 6 to 10K. And we were like, oh my God, we're going to do a 10K offset? And everybody's like, oh, that's not a problem. Like, have you ever done a 3K offset in full kit, full battle rattle?
Well, people think of a 3K as a jog down the street.
Yeah.
Not moving over terrain with all your equipment.
With 100 pounds of ammo and guns and
knives. Two very different things.
Completely different. Where you're walking a flat terrain and sand and tripping on and falling into ditches and aquifers and shit. That to me, I see it in the tactical world with all these tactical influencers. These dudes run and gun a gauntlet with no stress because it's just a rehearsed script.
Yeah.
They have no stress implemented. Physically or mentally, and they're perfect. And they're like, yeah, how impressed are you? If you've been to war, you're not impressed whatsoever, right? Whatsoever. Yep. Where you run from the aircraft, landing on the X 100 yards, and you're smoked out of your ass, trying to hold your gun and your laser together to kill bad guys. There's nothing impressive about that, man.
Yeah, it's interesting you say fitness is like not necessarily like looking at it just from your physicality.
Yeah.
Because like growing up in the regiment, your fitness is your 2 mile time and how many pull-ups you can do.
Yeah.
You know? But as I get older, The holistic approach is something that I've been geeking out on, both with like breath work and nutrition and meditation.
Biohacking, man.
Yeah, dude. Sauna, ice tub, like all that stuff. Just trying to keep the machine as optimal as I can.
Yeah, I'm about to get one of those rings. I think they're Ori rings or whatever that track your sleep. And our last bug out course, I shouldn't say it. Yeah, I'll say it. We had a guy in our course that trains with us named Jeffrey Wu. And Jeff Wu is like a pretty famous biohacker. And he's into intermittent fasting, but like the next level of that, where he does these fasts in these optimal windows based on all kinds of shit like temperature, sleep range. But that's how you optimize your overall performance. And that translates, like I love all these guys who think special operations, we're a bunch of savages, which, you know, to an extent we are, but that's more how we execute. When I was in the military in special operations, I didn't drink. I didn't even eat sugar because I was super healthy. Like I come back from an op still in kit and would go straight to the gym because everything you did translated into a potential move in action that could save your life and or save your buddy's life.
Yeah.
And when you look at preparedness, if you're not looking at preparedness that way, then you're not optimizing your capability. And when will you pay for that? You probably won't know because you'll probably be dead.
Yep.
And I tell people, like, you can get a gun all day long and you could take pictures of it and you could stipple it and you could, you know, serrate the slide and do all this cool shit. But I would rather spend the money on the ammo and making the best of what that is and investing in my capability, not investing in the aesthetic of what looks cool.
Yeah.
I'm not impressed by abs and fucking chest and tries because I know you're probably on anabolic steroids more likely. What I'm more impressed by is capability.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, where are we at on time, man?
Shit, I think we're almost 2 hours.
Oh, 2 hours?
Yeah. What are your podcasts typically?
Right at 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's
I think we got about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
2 hours, yeah.
Well, let's just do this, man. We can wrap up now. If people want to look into your stuff and follow you and maybe even attend some of your classes, like what's the best place to go? What's your schedule look like? What do you recommend?
So our company, I want people to understand I'm not the company, right? So I'm not Fieldcraft Survival. I have over a dozen employees. I have probably that same in subcontractors that teach. If Fieldcraft's in your town, which we're all over the place, we train 4 to 5 to 6 places every weekend. Everything from pistol, carbine, med, long gun, survival, overlanding. We're doing an overlanding course this weekend. We're doing motorcycles, snowmobiles this winter.
Are they kind of like a all-encompassing course where you dedicate 3 or 4 days, or can you kind of break it down to what you want to focus on?
You could break it down. So we like to, you know, we're realists and we want to make these courses convenient for people's schedule. Most of them are 1-day courses. Some of them are 2-day. But we have horse packing coming up in the near future. So it's a whole bunch of shit, right? Fieldcraftsurvival.com is the website. You can go there and see all the training. Our training sells out really fast. So if you want to get involved, subscribe, and you'll be the first to be notified when new stuff drops. Also, you know, if you do Fieldcraft everything, that's Instagram, YouTube, podcast, we try to give as much content for free as possible. That's just not a business strategy. That's like, we want people to understand that survival doesn't have to be cumbersome, inconvenient, and just weird.
Yeah.
We're not a bunch of preppers. All my guys are MARSOC guys, Navy SEALs, SF dudes, police officers, just good people who want to teach. And so we do that. We do equipment as well, like med, survival, swag, of course. And then American Contingency is its own thing. American Contingency, as that's spelled correctly, is the only site. We have some fake ones. But that's AmericanContingency.com, which we provide free intelligence, open source intel. I have 22 volunteers from the NSA, from the NRO, from the CIA that offer open source intel on geographical situational awareness that we provide for free on American Contingency. And then AmericanContingency.locals.com is the membership page. And I think we offer a buy-in of $5 per month. That helps pay for the service. We run a secure server. But you can get tuned into everybody that's on there.
Cool, man. So you're not becoming a millionaire off your American contingency.
We will never, I will never make $1 off American contingency, and that's a promise. What I will do is recycle the accumulation of money.
Yep.
Like in South Carolina, we're paying $20,000 to get 300 people trained by some Navy SEAL buddies of ours through American contingency in Lawrence, South Carolina, at the Sawmill Training Center, thanks to Scott Puckett, who runs that out there. My personal is mike.a.glover all over the Insta webs. So,
cool, man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you got anything else to add? Or
No, that's it, man.
wrap it up
I appreciate you, man, because you flew out here, and then what you're doing is awesome because you can be part of the system, which is problematic because they're becoming part of the problem because they're getting played by politicians. And I hate to see good police officers, especially guys from the regiment or guys from our community, getting sucked in that rabbit hole. But you decided to step away for the right reasons and then do good, what you're doing now.
Thank you, man.
And I'm proud of you, man. You're just doing good shit. And
that's
awesome to see.
It's a decision that, I sat down with my wife and we talked about it, and I said, I've been part of the system for so long, but I'm not, it's like going against who I am in my core, and it's just time to walk away.
Absolutely, man.
And so it's a new mission, and it's actually refreshing. It feels good.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I will support always what you guys have going on. I'd love to get your jiu-jitsu studio and roll and
let's do it, man.
Out, man. I'm just looking forward to see what the future holds for you, man. So thanks for having me on.
Cool, man. Appreciate it. Have a good one.